What's going on, guys? Kevin here from thesportsgeek.com, and in this video, I'm going to go over DraftKings NBA strategies to help you win more money. Number one, know the scoring system. You need to understand how players score points at DraftKings. You can see the image there on the right that shows you they have this at DraftKings when you're going to enter an NBA contest. You can check that out there, but it's fairly basic fantasy scoring with a few exceptions. There's half a point bonus for three-pointers made, and there's bonus points for double-doubles and triple-doubles. Number two, minutes played. So this might sound like stating the obvious, but there's a direct correlation between minutes played and fantasy points scored. So good players or big name players with low minutes might not perform well, so be careful of that. And also low price players with high minutes played can often be good bargains at DraftKings. So take a look at how often players are playing. If they're getting 25, 30 minutes, they might be a good play. The more minutes played usually means more fantasy points. Number three, monitor a team's rest. So be careful when teams are playing the second of a back-to-back, so no days rest, or situations such as fourth game in 7 nights. Coaches will often rest their starters when teams are playing on limited rest, sometimes making players completely inactive for the game. It's tough to predict, but definitely something to monitor. Number four, hot streaks. Basketball players can be streaky. If you catch a player at the start or middle of a hot streak, you can find some good value and some players that are going to put up big scores for you. But be careful of players in hot streaks when their prices rise on DraftKings. They might not have good value anymore. Also, be careful of average players off of 1 or 2 really good games. Those games might be an anomaly. They might fall back to reality and have a poor scoring game. So be careful if average or below average players are really hot, they might cool off. Number five, pay attention to the news. Set your lineups as late as possible. NBA has more fantasy news than any sport out there. There's a lot of injuries to monitor. Starting lineups can be changed right up till game time. Players are often out with injuries and those are announced really close to game time. So you need to be on top of things. It's best if you can build your lineups close to the game time so you can take the news into consideration and sometimes take advantage of the news. For example, if a starting point guard is out, their backup might become great value. Number six, use Vegas betting lines. So you can check out my website daily, sportsgeek.com/odds, and there we've got listed the betting lines for each sport. So you can click on NBA and you're gonna look for two things. You're gonna look for a total and a spread. The total will show you the expected number of points to be scored by both teams combined, while the spread's gonna show you which team is favored to win and by how many points. So how can you take advantage of this? High totals often equal more fantasy points. Lower totals often equal less fantasy points scored. But again, these are just projections by Vegas, so you can't 100% rely on them. But if you look for games with high totals, you're often going to see more fantasy points scored in those games. And also teams favored, especially teams favored by maybe 5, 10 or more points, have a better chance of scoring more fantasy points. Number seven, project ownership. So I have a full video on this topic on my YouTube channel that you can check out after you watch this video. But basically, if you can predict what percentage of people in a contest you're entering are going to own a certain player, you can sometimes gain an edge. For example, if you think Anthony Davis is going to be 75% owned, you can avoid rostering him, spend that money elsewhere, and if he has a poor game, you gain an advantage over 75% of the lineups. So it's not always good to fade a player like this. If you think a player is going to be highly owned, there's probably a reason for that. But if he is going to be highly owned, you project he's going to be highly owned and he does have a bad game and you don't take him in your lineup, you can gain an advantage over other people. Number eight, use your flex spots properly. So DraftKings NBA has 3 flex spots: guard, forward, or utility. In the guard spot, you can have a shooting guard or a point guard. Forward, you can have a small forward or a power forward. And utility, you can have any player. Fill these spots with players playing in the late games when possible to give you the most outs if you need to swap out a player later in the night. For example, if you have a point guard in the guard spot and he's playing in the late game, he's a late scratch, you can sub him out for a point guard or a shooting guard. But if you had that point guard who's playing in the late game in the point guard spot, you would only be able to sub him out for a point guard, and there might not be a good option at point guard later in the night. So make sure you have your late point guards in the guard spot, so that way if you do need to swap him out, if he's a late scratch, maybe he gets sick or whatever, you can have the option to choose a point guard or a shooting guard. Number 9, elite players versus top defenses. In DraftKings, beside each player, you will see the opponent's rank versus that position. So in this picture, you can see John Wall is going against the 5th ranked defense versus point guards. This can sometimes lead to people shying away from playing certain players versus defenses ranked high. Oftentimes the matchup doesn't matter too much for the elite players in the NBA. They still have the ability to put up 50, 60 or more DraftKings points even against the best defenses versus their positions. So don't shy away from the elite NBA players, even if they're going against top defenses. Make sure you have good reason other than just they're going against a top defense versus their position. Number 10, learn NBA DFS Stats. So this ties in with the next tip, but there are some fantasy specific stats for NBA that are worth paying attention to, including usage rate, pace of play, and defense versus position. So these are stats that a lot of people don't really think about if they're just watching the game, but they're good for fantasy purposes. It can include things like how involved players are in the plays when they're on the court, how fast-paced the offense plays, and how the opponent defense ranks in defending that certain position. Number 11, use DFS Tools. So there are tools out there that are going to help you with the stats mentioned on the previous slide. And these fantasy tools are also going to do other things like help you find players which are highly rated on the night, given their projections and pricing on the night. For example, a player that is priced at $4,700 and is projected to score 30 points will be more valuable than a player who is priced at $8,500 and expected to score 40 points. So these fantasy tools are out there to help you find value on the night. So here's my favorite fantasy tool for NBA. It's called Fantasy Labs. This is their player models, which has a ton of useful stuff. You can sort through position here, point guard, shooting guard, and then go through each player and see their ratings for a ton of different categories, including things that we talked about like Vegas betting lines, how many points each team is expected to score, how they've been doing this fantasy month, fantasy season, the upside they have, the consistency they have, points per game, and then an overall player rating for each player. So you can scroll through, look at all that stuff, or you can click on player name and find out more about the guy. So for example, Harden, you can go and look at his game logs, how many points he scored at DraftKings in the past couple games, how many minutes he's played, any news about him, different pro trends, really interesting stuff. I won't get too much into it, but you can check out the trends they have going, just projecting how many points they're going to be scoring over expectations. So you can see, you can sort by pro trends, find out who has the most trends for the night, take a look at those, and just pick players using all these different tools they have. It's really awesome. You can do news, ratings, trends, and they've even got news updates right on the right hand side. So as you're building lineups, you can check out news updates as well. Lots of cool stuff here. Highly recommend you guys check out Fantasy Labs. I've got a link to Fantasy Labs in the YouTube description below. Just click on that and it'll take you right over to Fantasy Labs to sign up. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by clicking the thumbs up button on YouTube so I know to keep making strategy videos like this. And if you don't already have access to my free lineup generator tool, make sure you click on the link in the YouTube description below. Get that tool absolutely free. You'll also get my email updates when I send out DraftKings picks. So I hope this video will help you win some money at DraftKings in your NBA contest. Good luck, guys. Cheers.